Hello and welcome everyone to this new episode of our online sessions. So today we're going to talk a little bit about a question that comes from one of our students in Germany. And so he asks, currently I'm noticing how important a solid practice is, especially in moments when things are going well. It helps me to be prepared for times that aren't so good. As you know, my motivation is not always as strong as it should be. This impacts the regularity of my practice. I think it could be helpful for me and maybe others if you could talk a little bit about the benefits of meditation. Please also discuss the timeframes in which we could realistically expect to make progress. Please also speak a little bit about the different stages of happiness. You've mentioned that the experience of happiness during meditation is more profound in comparison to everyday life happiness. What kind of stages can be reached and how are they dependent on the volume of our daily training? All right, so there are quite a few questions in this question. So let's go through them one by one. So first of all, he talks a little bit about being prepared for times that are stormy or difficult, and how important he feels that the practice is during times that are actually going well. Like, let's say, for instance, right now in this COVID situation, most of us are probably at home and locked into their rooms in some way. That can be a very, very good situation for meditation practice. In fact, it is. The less busy we make ourselves, the less we try to avoid ourselves during these times, and the more we kind of try to get to know ourselves, the more, of course, we can create a certain, like a certain stability within ourselves that helps us when times get really bad. For example, times of great stress or times of illness or loss or something like this. So when we have good, quiet times in our life, when there is not much going on, when there's not many disturbances, when we have the time that we usually don't have when we're busy with work and so forth, and then use this time for meditation practice or spiritual training and use it properly, then we can expect to create a certain stability within our mind that helps us when times go bad, when we experience hardship. And you might wonder, how does that help? Well, if you have a certain inner stability and if you are feeling well and comfortable within yourself, then the impact of illness or loss or anything, any kind of circumstance around you that is considered negative is by far less heavy. So it doesn't hit you as hard as it would hit you when you're already stressed on your inside, when your inside is already weak and shaky and imbalanced. Then an outside disturbance can truly kind of destroy your happiness and can destroy your health, can destroy your sense of well-being. This is very much like a virus, actually, as they say, with this COVID virus and also any other kind of virus. If your immune system is already weak, okay, then the virus can create far more damage than it could if you are having a strong immune system. So you can consider the good training that you do during the times when life goes well, when you're at ease, when you're happy, when you're having a good time, that this creates a strong immune system, a stable immune system, so that when times go tough, you at least have a good immune system, and so the damage is not that great. Or maybe there is no damage at all for you. So it is very, very true. This is a good observation. it's a good observation for all of us to make, because I observed that a lot of people, when they practice, and they usually start to practice when when their life goes really bad, and when they have a lot of trouble with their relationships or with their health, or they feel depressed and down and so forth. Then they get the idea, oh, I might try some meditation practice. I think this will help me. And then they do the meditation practice, and indeed it does help them. It lifts them up again. It takes their mind out of the mud of the various problems of thought. And so they gain some clarity and inner strength and happiness and well-being. That is already great. But then as soon as they have that happiness and that well-being, and life kind of follows suit, and it starts to reflect their inner happiness and their well-being by giving them kind of better, nicer circumstances, then they drop the practice again. This is very, very common. A lot of people come to our retreats, for example, in times when they're not feeling that well. Then the retreat really lifts them up. And after the retreat, they continue with their practice for a little while, and then life goes really nicely, and then they drop their practice. You might know this for yourself from your own experience. Right? So it's super important to consider this. These good times that we are experiencing, for some people more rarely than others, these good times are really important. When you have the leisure, when you have the time to practice, please use it well. Don't drop your practice with the argument that you say, oh no, I'm happy, I don't need to meditate. Because if you argument like that, if you say this, because I'm happy I don't need to meditate, then you're really missing out. Instead, ask yourself, could I be happier? What's the upper limit of my happiness? How happy could I be? Where does my potential end? What could I get out of this? Instead of kind of being satisfied with a tiny itsy bitsy happiness that you have in your mind that comes from a bit of practice, why not go deeper? Why would anyone actually refuse a deeper sense of happiness? Nobody would actually do that. If you were offered, let's say, some kind of food, special magical food that would make you happy, that means that you eat one spoonful of that food, you feel happiness. You eat another, you're even happier. You eat another, you're even happier. It gets better and better and better. Nobody would stop eating that food, right? So ask yourself, how happy could you be? What's the upper limit? Is there an upper limit? How far could you take this? Maybe it gives you some motivation to kind of continue your training when you're feeling well. Why not get better at this? Why not deepen it even more? Why not build your skills to such a degree of refinement that you can completely transcend all suffering? That suffering doesn't come back to you. I believe that this is an option, and we can choose this option. So maybe this helps you to establish a practice that is regular. It means you're not dropping off in good times and then practicing a lot more in bad times. But you're practicing whether times are good or bad. That is, in my opinion, it is a correct and good kind of practice. Make your practice reliable. You also don't say, for example, oh, actually today I'm feeling happy, so I don't brush my teeth. And only if I'm unhappy I brush my teeth, or only if people complain about the bad smell of my mouth do I brush my teeth. Right? We don't kind of say that. We brush our teeth whether we get negative feedback or not. So it's the same thing, and that there's a reason behind brushing our teeth, right? You kind of create a long-term protection for your teeth. It's not just about a short-term gratification that we only do whenever it's convenient, but it is something that creates a long-term impact, and so does meditation. If you brush your mind regularly, if you clean your mind regularly, the mind becomes more and more polished, more and more shiny. And it smells better and better. And for the long-term benefit, it is kind of like you are caring for old age. You're caring when times get really rough, because they will get really rough for all of us. As we're approaching old age, there's several problems that come with old age, right? We all know them. The only thing you need to do is visit an old people's home and interview people and ask them, like, how do you feel in comparison to when you were 30? Do you feel better or do you feel worse? How about your body? Is it easy to have that body, or would you prefer to have your body when you were 20 back? So with old age, the problems of the body become usually more and more, and with the problems of the body, also the problems of the mind increase. And so when we practice meditation early on in our life and we start to build a solid and powerful practice, old age can do you no harm if you are proficient in your practice. If you've really done your work during your life, then that's a perfect insurance for old age. And even though your body might have aches and pains, it will not weigh you down. It will not make you depressed. It will not create suffering in your mind. The mind stays radiant, clear, pure, happy, and at ease, no matter what the body does. So while you still can, do your practice regularly, do it well, and build it with power, so that it really carries you through difficult times, like old age, illness, and finally, of course, death. So that you can leave. I've heard once this beautiful example. I'm not sure. I think it was about the lifestyle of a monk and a nun. It means that when you die, you take off like an eagle from a rock, with no possessions, no heaviness. Nothing ties you down. You are simply ready to leave, naturally and at ease. There's nothing weighing you down. You're not sticking to anything. You're not tied up with anything. So you can simply lift and leave. That's freedom, right? Now consider for yourself, would you be ready to die today? Would you be ready to give it all up? Everything that you've worked for, everything that you care about, everything that you love. Are you ready to just leave it behind on that rock and just lift off and fly with freedom, not being tied to anything, not being bound up with anything? You're light, your heart is light, radiant, pure, free, not attached. It's at ease and happy. So that will be the preparation for death. Being just simply ready to take off. And so there's many things in our life that can go awry, that can go bad, that can give you trouble. But if your mind has a good immune system, if it is strong, then you can not only make it through these difficult times with ease and even happiness, where other people might emotionally break down and become depressed and maybe even suicidal, but you're able to maintain your happiness and your ease, but also you're able to transform that situation into a better situation where other people might give up because they have simply no mental strength left to deal with the situation wisely. Your mind is still so powerful and clear that you not only make it through the situation, but you can transform the situation into something that benefits yourself and others in the end, right? So you don't just have to give up and become sad and desperate and frustrated and depressed. You can make something out of the situation because you have inner power to change things. It's due to the lack of power in our minds that situations can defeat us. that they can pull us down and so forth. So it is really important to look after your mind well. I think it is the most important thing. The mind is the leader in our life. It decides who you become. It decides what you are doing. It decides how your life is going to look like to yourself and how it impacts on others. So it's hugely important. It's as important as a driver in the car is. If the driver is drunk, the car becomes a huge danger on the street. If the driver is sober, it's much better. And if the driver has a clear goal, the car is really useful. It can get you anywhere. It's a similar thing with the mind. If however, there is no driver in the car is just a useless piece of metal. The car only becomes useful due to the driver's presence and due to the driver's goals and directions. That makes the car useful. Otherwise, it's just a piece of metal, right? Same with our mind and our body. Otherwise, without a mind, our body is just a corpse. It just lies around. It's quite harmless, actually. It doesn't do anything. It's just kind of a piece of biological matter that disintegrates. But with a mind, in combination with the mind, the body can do a whole lot of things. It can do a whole lot of benefit and it can do a whole lot of harm. And with a well-trained mind, this body can do huge amounts of benefit. Well, if that doesn't motivate you, then find something that motivates you to practice. So this is important. Now let's go into this point a little bit of motivation. Here, Michael, the student, he says that this impacts the regularity of my practice. Right? He says that his motivation is not always as strong as it should be, and so this impacts the regularity of his practice. And he further says, I think it could be helpful for me and others if you could talk a little bit about the benefits of meditation. So now I've just talked a little bit about the benefits of meditation, but he wants to specifically talk a little bit more about the happiness that could be expected and about the time frames. So he likes to think about how long will it take me to reach this and that kind of happiness, right? That's very common. I think a lot of people, they wonder when they first encounter meditation practice, then they think about this. They think, how long? I get this question actually quite often. How long does it take me to become peaceful? What can I expect? I mean, if I practice, let's say if I practice for 2 months, every day, 30 minutes in the morning, will I become more peaceful? Unfortunately, the answer to that is not as simple, because lots of things, they need to come together for the practice to unfold in a way. First of all, let's assume you already have the prerequisites of having a good teacher that can guide you properly, having an experienced teacher, right? And the second one would be having good circumstances, meaning you have the time, the leisure. You're not living in some sort of oppressive situation. You're not living in a country where meditation has never been heard of. You're having the time and the money and the food. You don't need to worry about food. Most of us who listen to this don't have to worry about a roof over your head. So these are already a whole lot of leisures, right? There are a whole lot of good qualities that we all have to actually start our meditation practice and make progress. So let's say that's all already established. Now it's only a matter of actually putting in the work, sitting down regularly, and then building your strength. What happens, maybe I want to talk a little bit more about what needs to happen before actually the sitting down can bear proper fruit. Let's say you have a lifestyle that's incredibly distractive. Like you're you're constantly consuming some videos online in your free time, reading books, listening to music, talking with your friends, being constantly in a state of busyness, it's going to take you a very, very, very long time to create results on the path. Okay? So the first thing that you want to check on is, how do I behave during my everyday life? That has a big impact on your practice. It's probably one of the biggest impacts. What do you do in your free time? I mean, we all have to work. Like, how do you behave at work? How do you spend your free time, your lunch break? How do you relate to your colleagues? How do you relate to your boss? What kind of work are you doing? And so forth. So all these things play a role, of course. They impact on your mind. They leave a trace in your mind. They shape your mind. They mold your mind into something. So what you do during most of the day, it shapes your mind. It turns your mind into a certain type of mind. Let's say if you are constantly distracting yourself, what do you think does that do to your mind? Like if you consume one video after another on YouTube in your free time, what do you think does that do to your mind? If you listen to music constantly, like whenever you can, you put in your earphones and you can't bear a moment of silence, so you immediately put in the earphones and listen to music. What does that do to your mind? Right? Everything that you do in your daily life does something to your mind. It shapes your mind into something. It's not that actions don't have results. Every little action that you do every day has a result. And it is important to see that. If we ignore that and still kind of hope that the practice will somehow benefit us and help us, it won't. That there is no way that it could. Please consider this. Yeah, many people nowadays, they kind of hope to sneak meditation practice into their normal lifestyles. It means they don't want to give up things that actually harm their mind on the long run. They don't want to give them up because they're pleasurable things, and they're also highly addictive things. Most of the things we do these days are kind of even designed to make you addicted to them. So it's important to if you want to make any progress with your meditation, you kind of have to give up a few things that you are addicted to, that you like, that you do habitually, that you do constantly. If you want your meditation practice to yield the results that it should, which is higher stages of happiness and well-being. But it's difficult because it's kind of a deal. If I told you, now try it out. For 1 week, don't listen to any music and continue to do your practice. Do you see an impact? Are you feeling better? This is going to be difficult because it's just 1 week. In 1 week, you might not notice much difference. You might only notice a complaining mind that wants to listen to its music, that wants to do what it is used to do. But if you continue, if you have some faith and you continue and you do your practice well, the mind will gradually let go of the many thousands of songs that it holds on to, and it slowly becomes calm and quiet. When it becomes calm and quiet, you really do the practice well, it starts to produce, or maybe producing is the wrong word, we could say it starts to reveal deeper stages of happiness that have been covered by all the music so far. So you kind of have to give up one thing, you have to give up one type of happiness to get a bigger return. And for many people, they don't trust this. They say, all right, if I give up my happiness that I have right now, which is my music, do I really get these results? I mean, is it worth it? Because I really like my music, and I really like my videos, and I really like my various distracting kind of things that I do every day. I'm attached to them. I really need them. So giving them up, it must produce some results. Now then they do this meditation retreat, and it's very intense atmosphere, and then they feel results for the first time. And when you start to feel some results for the first time, you have more faith. You feel, okay, this seems to be true. I've never felt that good. It seems to be true that if I reduce my distractions, that I might start to feel better, that I might get healthier, that I might sleep better, that my relationships to other people and my communications with them every day become better and more fulfilling, more satisfying, if I just do this regularly and I stop doing these other things that I was used to, addicted to, that I liked a lot, that I was very attached to, my life might get better. So that's, for most people, is kind of the start. And then they notice, just even by giving up things that they thought were fulfilling them, like let's say if you're addicted to your smartphone and you're constantly checking your phone, constantly, and then one day you say enough, and you stop checking your phone every whatever, few minutes or half an hour or something. And for the first time in your life, you notice after 3 days of doing this consistently that you start feeling better. And you're not as unhappy as you've been 3 days ago anymore. And you start to appreciate things like the taste of food or a good conversation with someone. And all of a sudden, slowly your eyes are opening up and you see the society around you, and then suddenly you see all these other people and how they constantly stare into their phones. And you suddenly notice that this looks strange from the outside. Your mind, your brain, your body, everything is slowly changing due to the change that you've made inside. You've made a decision and you're sticking to it. And due to the decision and due to sticking to it, due to doing the work, your experience of life slowly changes. You're beginning to wake up. But as long as we're stuck in our habits and in our daily life kind of grind, it's I would not say entirely impossible, but nearly impossible, and impossible for most of us, to actually create the results that meditation practice needs to create, which is increased levels of health and happiness and balance within yourself. And so therefore we can listen to talks like this that motivate us, that give us kind of a perspective. Hearing from someone that does the work or has done the work, that tells you, look, you could feel so much better if you just did this and that, and if you stopped doing this and that. So it's dependent on those two actions. You need to give up some things and you need to cultivate some things. And when you do that, you proceed in stages. I've mentioned that before, but the stages are kind of as follows. The first thing that you give up in your meditation practice is an unkind attitude towards yourself. You always start in the beginning to receive yourself with kindness, to allow yourself to be, to accept yourself as you are. That's not something that just happens someday. That is something that you're gradually getting better at. Okay? So every day when you do your practice and you pay attention to this first little detail and you receive yourself with kindness, and you're making an effort to try to receive yourself with kindness, try to let yourself be, you're getting better at it. Your wisdom in that area will grow. You will make more and more experiences as you move along. And each one of those experiences informs you in a way. It's a new way of approaching yourself. So you kind of want to take time, and you want to see that by doing the work, you're building the basis for this work to come to fruition. And coming to fruition is nothing that happens in an instant, someday, if you're diligent enough, but it will happen gradually, like any kind of training. If you're building muscle, for example, doing push-ups every day, then also your muscles not growing like instantly one day and suddenly you're buff, but it's more like a very gradual process. And gradually, if you do it 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, you start to notice small results. And it is these little results that motivate you. You see, oh wow, it works. Compared to day 1, where I could only do 3 push-ups, now I can do 10. And I can do 10 easily. Whereas before my first day, 3 were really, really difficult. It's kind of like that. So now with the kindness, receiving yourself with kindness, you will start discovering things every time you're entering the mode of practice. And you're sincerely investigating, how can I make this work with an undistracted mind? How can I let myself be? Let me try. And then you hear teachings about this. Then you try to put that into your work. You integrate what you've heard and what you've learned. And you try to fit it in. And slowly, it will yield results. Suddenly you notice where you are controlling yourself and where you're holding on, and how pushy you are and how aggressive you are with yourself, whereas before you've never noticed that. If anyone would have told you, look, you're treating yourself quite aggressively and pushy, you would have denied it. You would have said, no, that's not true. But now, because you're carefully looking at yourself, carefully being a key word here, you're carefully looking at yourself, you start to see things that you have not seen before, that you were unable to see before. And because you see these hidden mechanisms in your mind, you can start to work them differently. You can use them to your advantage, and all of a sudden you gradually learn session by session how to be a bit more kind to yourself and how to let go of aggression towards yourself and being pushy to yourself, controlling yourself a little bit more. And as you go along, you start feeling better. Suddenly it's fun, it's nice when you discover something new about yourself. Particularly if that what you've discovered leads to a form of release, and you suddenly are able to relax with yourself, have a good time with yourself, whereas before you were struggling with yourself. And that's just the very beginning. And even if you stayed only with that point for the rest of your life, it would take you into depths that are unimaginable, that you cannot fathom. You cannot think of how deep these things actually are. It looks like a little thing. Just be a bit more kind to yourself. Accept yourself. Love yourself. It's a little thing. It's a little kind of instruction. It's just a few words. But it appears to me that the depth of this instruction is infinite. I haven't found a bottom to this. And so you kind of want to bring in this spirit of exploring, having fun exploring new things, learning, growing. It's a fundamental human need to grow. We all want to grow. We want to get better at things. This is what pulls you deeper into the practice. You're curious. You really want to get to know yourself. And particularly because this kind of knowing leads to more happiness and ease, more coolness, more well-being. With every little insight, you will notice that it gets a bit better. That's nice. If I let go here, that feels good. Can I take that any deeper? What if I let go over there too? How nice is that? And so it kind of gradually takes you down. Please stop expecting a sudden explosion of amazingness after 2 months or 3 months or 5 years of practice. It's not like that. It's not a sudden explosion of amazingness. It's a gradual growth of goodness and niceness, and you kind of want to slide into that more and more, appreciating it more and more. And in order to do that, you have to have the eyes to see that. You have to proceed carefully. Your happiness has to be important enough for you to actually cultivate it directly, like a muscle. And it's not that a muscle suddenly pops up and is huge. It takes time for a muscle to grow. Calculate that in. Then the first stage of our practice, where we deal with releasing tension in the body. That is supposed to be a nice process. If you are suffering this process, you have to change the way you approach it. That's another important step. It's like if you are moving into a suffering, you're moving the wrong direction. Are you intelligent enough to change your direction then? Don't change your practice, but change the way you do it. Ask yourself the right kind of questions. Where am I in my way right now? Why doesn't that feel nicer if I let go? It should feel nicer. And you might feel that you're pushing the letting go. You're trying to let go. You're kind of aggressively letting go because you kind of want to get to the point where it feels good. And so you're clenching your teeth and you're trying to kind of break through and have all these insights. I've been doing this for 3 months now. God damn it. When do the results come? This is unskillful. If you can notice that, and if you could just stop doing that, it would be so much nicer, wouldn't it? So you need to kind of have the insight to discover where you are in your way. How do you block yourself? How do you make it unpleasant? Because every suffering that you're experiencing, it is self-made. Suffering is something that you are doing. And when you stop doing suffering, it's nice. And the more you stop to do suffering, on more and more subconscious levels, if you kind of discover how you're doing suffering to yourself day in and day out, then you can stop doing that. And every time you stop, it's nice. If it isn't nice, then it is due to the suffering that you're doing to yourself right now in this moment. So then we come to the second stage in our practice here, which is present moment awareness. Here you let go of doing the suffering of past and future thinking. Thinking of what's next, thinking of what happened previously. If you stop doing that, it'll get nice. But since we're not really used to that, we are mostly used to being constantly absorbed in future or past, in our mind, constantly feeling that we live on some sort of timeline, trying to get somewhere, coming from somewhere, becoming someone, always striving, always struggling. It will take some time to discover what it's like to be present. And even after all those years that I've been doing this, I still discover presence. And it's going deeper and deeper and deeper. And it's always a different kind of discovery. I mean, it's a similar or same discovery, but it leads deeper. And it shows me deeper facets of being present. And it's every time like an eye-opening experience. It's like, wow. Oh, so that's presence. Damn, I've been missing it for the past 2 years or 3 years. I haven't seen that it's that simple. And then I go into that. And then it takes a good time for me to practice to get used to that new state. I have to it's like finding a frequency on the radio and then going into that frequency. Then coming back to that same frequency, it takes time until I get skilled enough to just dial in instantly. And then the next challenge is to, once I've dialed in, to stay within that frequency for long enough so it can take me deeper. The reason why it cannot take me deeper, it is because I resist it. And I'm still, on some level, am doing my suffering in the background. And this prevents me from going deeper. It prevents me from falling deeper. So we have to then discover that new kind of suffering that I'm doing on a deeper level now. I have to see, like, where am I stuck right now? And how do I get unstuck? You kind of have to have this fun exploring things, going deeper, learning, growing. If you don't have that, you're not, it won't work for you. You kind of have to be obsessed about it in a way. Having fun exploring your mind and its mechanics. It's like a hobbyist that kind of builds his little trains in the basement with a whole country around it and so forth. There are these people who are, they as soon as they have some free time, they run down there and they build their thing. They get engaged with their hobby. And during the day, they think about it a lot. If you want fast results with meditation practice, you've got to have this kind of mindset. And I think one of the best kind of mindsets is really this mindset that wants to let go of suffering for the sake of discovering what's underneath this layer of suffering. How much nicer can it be? And of course, if people are kind of lazy and convenient and they just feel like they don't need to do anything, they will never discover their deeper being. They will never discover how happy they could be. It's kind of, well, it's unfortunate, but that's the way this world is. Most people don't have this interest. They don't want to understand themselves. Not really, at least. They don't want to take the real time to discover, like, how happy could they be, and then really push for it, go into it. Maybe pushing being the wrong word here, but let it happen. Get out of the way, right? So the third stage is about letting go of the inner voice. That's another layer of suffering. And look, most people would not consider their inner voice as suffering. They would not think of this as suffering. They would think of this as normal, or they wouldn't think of it at all. Right? But as soon as you discover, oh, there is an inner voice, and it doesn't let me sleep at night, and it doesn't let me calm down, and it constantly gives me these dramatic stories of a dramatic future in which I might fail, and in which I might die, and in which everything might be terrible, or, whatever it is that your voice tells you all the time. Most people are unaware of this voice in their head. They don't even know that it's there because they're so identified with it, they can't see it. It's like looking at your own face. You can't look at your own face. You're in it. You're looking out of it. So most people are looking out of their inner voice. They're in their inner voice. They're totally identified with it. They are the voice. So they can't see it. If you told them, look, you have a voice in your head, they would say, no, I'm not crazy. I don't have voices in my head. But they do. They just can't see it, literally. They're blind to it. But then you tell them, come, let's do a meditation together. Let's sit down for 30 minutes and just watch our breath. Maybe then, because they now take some care and they try to watch their breath, suddenly they notice, oops, something's in the way of watching my breath. And it's constant stories. And maybe then they become aware of their inner voice. And suddenly their inner voice turns into an object and they try to get rid of it. And say, okay, if I could only get rid of my inner voice, then I could focus on my breath. Maybe now they are ready to hear that they have an inner voice. Because for the first time in their life, this inner voice doesn't do what they want it to do. So they notice it as an object outside of them somehow, as an interference, as a noise. Maybe now they are ready to go deeper. You see, that's how it is with meditation. And don't think you are beyond all that because you know an inner voice. There's so many things that are that you are identified with still that you don't know, that you can't see because you're in it. And all those little things and identifications, they make you suffer. How wonderful could it be if you weren't producing suffering subconsciously for yourself? If you could stop that. How wonderful if your eyes were strong enough to illuminate the dark recesses of your subconscious mind, so you could see the many ways in which you would make yourself suffer unnecessary. How deep could it get? How happy could I be? And in how many ways am I in the way of happiness shining through me, through my mind, through my being? So yes, the happiness that arises during meditation is by far more deep and profound and impactful than your normal everyday happiness could ever be. And again, that is something that I encourage you to play with. Look every time during your day when you're experiencing something nice and happy. Look at the happiness and analyze it. See how it is like. Just let it be there. There's no need to do anything to it. But observe it. Have a look at it. How is it like? Is it very stable? Is it very powerful? What kind of happinesses do you experience during your everyday life? And then, when you're practicing your meditation and you get some proficiency, meaning you're able to keep the mind still for a little while, and the happiness starts to bubble up from that practice, because when the mind is still, then true happiness starts to rise. Or a more profound happiness starts to rise, say like that. And you will feel it in your body, you will feel it in your mind, you will notice it with your breath, your heartbeat. Everything becomes cool and pleasant and so nice. And it's a result of the mind being completely still. Now, compare that to the happiness that you get when someone gives you a compliment. That's a type of happiness. Compare it to the happiness that you get when you're eating a nice meal or seeing a nice sight. When you're experiencing any type of things that you would consider to be a happiness. Someone saying, I love you, someone giving you a hug, something nice, whatever it is in your life. Compare it to that specific happiness that comes when the mind becomes still. And you will see that it's worlds apart. It's very different. The more still your mind becomes, the more amazing the happiness that shows itself to you becomes. And it's a completely different, like a completely different type of happiness. You will notice that the happiness that you experience with your senses in everyday life, it is very kind of busy. It's buzzy inside. It's like restless. It doesn't have any stability to it, and it's not really that great. But of course it's great for you if you have nothing else, if you don't have a better comparison yet. But then you start to practice, and for the first time, because your mind becomes finally still, you can see clearly, like, how nice could you actually feel and then you look back, you will completely understand what I'm telling you right now. But if you haven't made that experience yet, then you don't have anything else to compare it with. All you have is the busy kind of everyday happiness. So you need to become sensitive to how that happiness increases when the mind becomes still. So a reason for the mind to feel happy and to feel energized is a still mind. The more still your mind becomes, the happier you should be feeling. Okay? So that's kind of all for this session. This is a bigger topic. I might talk a little bit more about this this coming Thursday. For now, I hope that it made some sense, at least, and gave you some kind of motivation to build a real solid practice and to really work on stabilizing the mind and explore just how happy you could be and how happy you could become along the line of following this deeper down the rabbit hole. And for now, I think that's good enough for today. If you do have any questions, I always mention that online. I sometimes encourage you in the comment section of the posts. Ask your questions, just like Michael did, or other students are doing. If you do have any questions, if you feel like you want to discuss something that's important to your practice and that would help you, just let me know. You can write that down in any of the comment sections where I'm posting this, either on Facebook or YouTube or SoundCloud or so. Just let me know. I will do my best to kind of integrate your questions into these sessions. And right now, feel free to make this a bit more interactive, because during this Corona crisis or Corona time, nobody is coming to our center right now. Of course, we're also closed. I have plenty of time to discuss your questions and integrate them in the sessions. So for now, I wish you a wonderful week and a good time. Stay safe and healthy. Practice well.